Welcome everybody to the Neurotrauma Guide Part 5. In this part I will cover first aid and emergency response situations, from mud raptor attacks, gunfight injuries, explosive injuries, and other tips the rest of the crew should know and make your life as a neurotrauma surgeon easier. This section is more of a lecture and I won't be demonstrating much, but I want to leave a few words about how to react in emergency situations. Step 1 is to evaluate the problem. This may sound simple, but it's very important. Assess if the area of the patient you are trying to get to is safe and clear of enemies, and make sure you go into your emergency response with an idea of what happened. I know that sounds easy, but it's important to master. If you spot bleeding, they were shot, bit, or broken artery. If they have a stiff limb, something broke. They fell, or were attacked by an animal or explosives. If they're unconscious with no nearby threats, it may be suffocation, radiation sickness, or sepsis. Please watch the Intro to Neurotrauma video to see the proper kit you need to be best suited for all situations. Next, I'll go more into depth about the order things should be treated. Remember, this is part 5, so I'll continue with this section under the assumption you've watched the other videos and understand what these afflictions are and what their treatment options are. Once you've made sure the area is clear of threats and you've gone over their afflictions, it's time to worry about the best course of actions to take. First and foremost, stop bleeding. Do this with sutures or bandages. Sutures are most effective and can also help with closing open wounds, like lacerations and bite wounds. Check every limb for bleeding and close every opening you can find on your patient except for gunshot wounds. Next, use our health scanner on the patient's torso. Carefully read the list of afflictions and then get your patient to a surgery bed. Either drag them or tell them to come with you if they're standing. Once there, give opium and open the patient's chest. If you're using Anti-Surgery Plus, remember to use antiseptic spray on your patient's limb before opening it with the scalpel. Of course, you need to treat every affliction the health scanner picks up, but if they have multiple life-threatening afflictions, the ones you need to watch out for and fix first is traumatic amputation, femoral, humeral, or carotid artery rupture. Next, check for cardiac arrest and respiratory arrest. If the treatment for either of these work first try, great. If not, continue to monitor and treat these as you continue your treatment. The heart and lungs need to be working for the whole process. Next, scan the torso and look for cardiac tamponade or pneumothorax. After that, there's 2 more things to check for: organ health and fractured ribs. First, worry about organ damage. Immediately treat it with thiamine and let the patient rest. And then finally check for fractured ribs. If you spot them, treat them last before closing the torso. After you're sure there's no more problems in the chest, check the head for skull fracture and neck fracture. And check for pale skin. If you see it, use the hematology analyzer to measure blood loss. If they're unconscious, check for neurotrauma, coma, and stroke. Stroke can be treated with open-close surgery, and neurotrauma requires mannitol. Coma cannot be treated, and you must monitor your patient. Next, scan the body for infected wounds or wounds that are still open. Use antiseptic spray on infected wounds, and use the sutures on open wounds like lacerations, bite wounds, or deep tissue injuries. For gunshot wounds, remove the bullets from the bullet wound before closing it. Then use your hematology analyzer to check for acidosis, alkalosis, or sepsis, which will show up only on the analyzer at early stages. Then, transfusion shock and blood pressure. Treat sepsis before all else. Next is to treat high blood pressure if it's nearing the 150% range. If blood pressure is lower than 70% and your patient has neurotrauma above 100%, remember to use Ringer solution. Mannitol doesn't work if blood pressure is too low. And worry about acidosis or alkalosis. Remember to treat acidosis by taking blood or giving your patient raptorbane extract, and cure alkalosis by taking blood and then giving saline for the fastest treatment option. This only works if your patient's blood levels are back around the 10% or less blood loss range. After this initial rundown, you can check for other less lethal afflictions such as radiation sickness, fractures, dislocations, and other things of the sort. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. It's important your crew carries some supplies on them to treat themselves while waiting for your help. Either show this part of the video to your friends or spread this information to them yourself. Carry a stack of bandages with you. If you're hurt, get to a safe place and treat yourself. Check for bleeding and bandage any limb that's bleeding. Also, if you spot that you have fractured ribs or a fractured skull, bandage them, as it can reduce the bad effects they give over time and will help your surgeon a great deal. Carry 4 tourniquets on you as well. If you spot the affliction humeral artery bleeding, which can show up on your arm, or femoral artery bleeding, which can show up on your legs, use the tourniquet on that limb. And if you have carotid artery bleeding, which will show up on the head, do not tourniquet this and tell someone immediately you have this affliction. Next, they should have some antibiotic ointment on them. Use this to treat first or second degree burns. If your ointment is limited and you have multiple burns, treat whatever burn is worse and go from there. This cannot treat third degree burns. Finally, this one is mostly up to the surgeon if they're okay with this, but it won't hurt to carry a couple gypsum with you. If your surgeon is okay with spending money to keep everyone supplied with gypsum, this is needed for fractures. Remember, fractures, not dislocations. Treat a fracture, bandage the limb first, then use the gypsum. One other thing is dislocations. If you're okay with being stunned for a moment and your surgeon's not close to you, you can fix your own dislocation with a wrench. Remember to learn the differences between dislocation and fractures. Remember, this advice I'm giving you isn't to allow you to treat yourself fully in these situations, but to give your surgeon an easier time with healing you. Knowing these basic first aid tips can save your life. This section will be split into 3 parts: explosive, bullet, and monster attacks, from the order to the least to most deadly. Each demonstration will be put in 2 parts. First, I'll show you the full operation silently. Then after that, I will go through the footage with you and explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. I will be using the surgeon class from Anti-Surgery Plus with only 1 skill to allow me to carry patients at full speed, nothing more. Here's the explosive scenario with my crewmate, Taff. So now I will voice over everything that's happened in this operation to give you an idea of my thought process of everything that was going on. Remember, the first important step is always to assess the situation and what you see. Visually, you can see stiffness, broken limbs, broken arms, missing limbs, You can see a foot behind her head, probably belongs to her, and a whole lot of bleeding. Well, remember, like I said, always stop bleeding as fast as you can. Tourniquet any broken arteries. If there's a traumatic amputation, there's going to be artery bleeding with it. I'm only using antiseptic before I open here because I'm using Anti-Surgery Plus. If you're not using Anti-Surgery Plus, you shouldn't need to worry about doing that. Here I'm working on putting the leg Here I'm working on putting the leg back in. Just want to make sure the heart doesn't progress to cardiac arrest. The moment you hear it gets sporadic enough, just go ahead and shock it. From the scan I just did, I can see blood loss over 50%, so we should use a blood pack soon. Internal bleeding, don't want that. That's what the open and closed surgery is for. Now that the torso's alright, we're moving other parts of the body. Next is always the head. There's nothing there, so we just need to worry about fixing up the smaller stuff now. This is a good time to fix the broken, dislocated limbs. Remember, always start with the legs, get your patient walking as soon as you can. It's always good to do one last check, but always make sure, you don't check too many times. That'll cause radiation sickness, and we don't want that. Next, I will show you a gunshot scenario. Gunshots will be split into two different examples. This is the easy operation example, showcasing a single gunshot wound issue, which will usually come up through accidents or similar problems. Alright, so let's go through this. Normally, depending on where exactly the bullet hits, it can cause you to be unconscious or minorly inconvenienced at the least. I stopped the bleeding, but I didn't immediately patch the gunshot wound, because if you remember, it's more efficient to take the bullets and foreign objects out through the gunshot wound instead of a surgical incision. Remember, the tweezers take out 5% foreign objects, so you need to divide 5 by the percentage of foreign body you see to know how many times you need to use the tweezers. After you're done taking the bullets out, quickly patch it up. You can see here there's a fractured skull, immediately obvious, and it's causing neurotrauma to be built up. As you can also see down there, it came on very quickly, so we have to hurry up and patch that out before it's a problem. There, the moment you see the fever, you immediately need to treat with antibiotics, and when you give antibiotics, always give thiamine with it. Here we're checking for blood pressure. It's a little low. But it shouldn't pose much of an issue right now. That was an accident. I meant to use the health scanner. Please ignore that. It's already getting better. Everything looks good. No problems in the chest cavity. No problems in the head either. But it's always safe to make absolute sure you didn't miss anything. With neurotrauma under 50%, 100%, it's usually completely negatable as long as they're breathing, their lungs are working, so that's why I left it at that. Now I will show you a Mercy Hospital preset scenario, one you're likely to run into if an ally has been attacked by mud wrappers. Remember, make sure the coast is clear before running in to help. Alright, let's go through this. Obviously, we can see from assessment here that there's a whole lot of blood loss. Foot just fell off. So that's a problem we know we're going to have to deal with. If you have enough inventory space, you can usually grab the extra limb. Here we immediately stop the bleeding. Gonna suture up every piece of bleeding we can find, trying to get the leg, since it, kind of came off. Gonna start to lead him towards the hospital bed while we try to work on him here. Need to start surgery on here to reattach the leg. Always do that as soon as possible. Remember that detached limbs can always be reattached, but they have health bars. His heart was getting sporadic there, you can just tell from the sound. Always defibrillate. There we have the leg back on. We still have an open wound, but we need to check the chest cavity first, it's more important. See blood loss over 50, we should give a blood pack. We have some alkalosis, which isn't a big issue, but blood pressure way too low. This is only a problem if he has neurotrauma, but from the way things are looking, he doesn't. Need to get the heart in check, make sure it's working. Here we're just waiting for new symptoms, seeing if everything flares up or if his health goes down at all. The progression here, everything seems to be going alright, there's no problems. It's always a good idea to spend plenty of time monitoring them. You could always forget something if you have an oversight, blood pressure gets too high, you think they're okay, and all of a sudden they could have a stroke and die in a couple seconds. So it's always important to watch after an emergency of that scale. Finally, I'll show you the most challenging scenario, being the hard gunshot wound scenario. We'll use the Mercy Hospital preset here to simulate a patient that's been attacked by armed enemies like guards or bandits. Always remember to stay vigilant and careful. And one wrong move, and it could cost your patient their life, especially if you're not using any skills here like I am. Live Lev reaction. Let's go. So we can see here he had his arm immediately shot off. Never a good sign. It also means we can see plenty of bleeding. Trying to get the missing limb, stop all the other bleeding. Let's leave the chest open with gunshot wounds because we can probably take a few out. We administer propofol, which is an anesthetic. After a while, we'll make him stop using. We'll make him stop moving. We're going to, because we're using anti-surgery plus, we're going to clean the wounds. Not necessary in vanilla. We're gonna scan the torso here. We got 50% foreign body divided by 5. We know we need to use the tweezers 3 times. Did I say the torso? I meant the arm. You can see gangrene is starting to build up, so it's important we start getting all that bleeding figured out. We can see respiratory arrest here, so we know that we need to manually give him air. First, we're going to bring him to the hospital bed and collect his arm so we can sew that back on. Heart stopped here. We're just going to try and get his systems working again while trying to get his arm back on. Here we check the torso, and oh boy, we have a lot of stuff here. You can see me scanning down the line. I'll get to that in a moment. That was what was going through my mind. While waiting for the arm to sew open, we just go ahead and we start cutting open here. I spawned a drainage here because I completely forgot to put one in my inventory since I last used one for an example. My bad. I need to get the heart running here. You can see 32% foreign bodies. We used the tweezers for a while, get that out, try and prevent sepsis from happening. I'm gonna get that chest cavity back open because I think I accidentally closed it. Try and alleviate the blood loss issues. You can see a fever kicking on, so we make sure that we give some antibiotics and thiamine to counter it. Because I forgot the thiamine though. I think I had already given thiamine before, but even though we were rescanning the issues, we have a pneumothorax to worry about, fractured ribs to worry about. We'll get those out of the way as fast as possible. The rest of the things, internal bleeding, heart tamponade is all going to fix itself once we close, so that should be everything in the chest. Here, the respiratory arrest and the respiratory arrest and the cardiac arrest, excuse me. It's going to be too much of a problem. I just use the auto pulse while I do work elsewhere. I'm done checking the torso, so we go to the head. 152 neurotrauma, not good. We use mannitol because, as you can see, he's seconds away from dying here. We give that extra thiamine that we needed to give him earlier. Here I'm thinking about it's about time we give him diazine, our miracle medicine here. Remember, it treats blood loss, hypoxemia, organ damage. And yep, it's time to give that. It always gives us a nice boost and a bit more time. Here I start manually on the lungs and the heart again. Do our best to make sure his health doesn't sink back down below where it's supposed to be. You can see the blood loss here is at acceptable levels. The organ damage was still high, but thank goodness we used the diazine when we did, or else it might have killed him. I see here that the blood pressure is getting a little high, but nothing I can do about it right now. Start fixing some of the smaller issues while I wait, pretty much. You can see a lot of organ damage issues here. There's nothing that can solve those aside from time. Everything that's causing them is gone now, so I'm not too worried about them. There's still some brain damage, but that's being worked through pretty fast. I don't want to give another mannitol because it could damage organs a lot further. Here, I ran out of batteries, so I improvised. As I said, it's very important to stay very, very vigilant. Remember, try not to use the scanner as much here because it could cause radiation sickness. Let me see, the heart is really damaged. It's not failing just yet. Same thing with the kidneys. The kidney damage is at 70%, so there will need to be a kidney transplant to take place, but that's not urgent, so I don't do it here. Just do keep in mind a single kidney would need to be transplanted if above 50% kidney damage. Yeah, we're just waiting for him to be more stable, sterilizing the area. You can see where I've been putting all my junk from the previous attempts. Sometimes it's like this, the patient is only very slowly recovering. I can see in the top screen there, his blood pressure is actually getting a little high. It's not in a deadly range just yet, but I just wanted to be extra safe. It's better to have low blood pressure than high blood pressure, so before it could go up any higher, I, some point around here, prescribed sodium nitroprusside. You can see that there's some acidosis down there. There's not really a whole lot I can do about that now, though, so I don't do anything about it. The health bar is not going down any, so that's a good sign. The BP is getting a little low. We're not too worried about that. It's not below 70, so we're okay. Yeah, we just stack on a little extra thiamine because those organs really weren't doing too good. The only thing that can heal them is time and thiamine, so we need to give them as much thiamine as we can. Here, the blood pressure is staying above 70. The brain damage is staying fairly still as well, but it's just kind of like that sometimes. I didn't want to use another mannitol because I didn't want to risk damaging the organs any more than they had to, because they're already getting pretty close to going down. I hope you found this tutorial useful. Please show the series some support if you did, because I personally don't like making these kinds of videos, but I want everyone to have as much fun with this mod as I do. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments under any video in the series. Doesn't matter what it's about, there's no dumb questions. After this tutorial, I will likely start to talk about the add-on mods, so stay tuned if you want to learn about NT-Cybernetics, NT-Surgery Plus, or NT-Pharmacy. If there's anything Neurotrauma related you'd like a tutorial on, let me know and I'll try to make it happen. Merry Christmas if you're watching this on release. Happy holidays for those who don't celebrate Christmas, and if celebrations aren't your thing, then have a good day at least. As always, nighty night, sleep tight, don't let the muddy buddies bite, and happy sailing.